All right, folks, buckle up for a deep dive. We're heading into some pretty wild territory today.
Oh, this should be good.
Our listeners have sent in some sources that, well, let's just say they paint a very different picture of Barack Obama.
A different picture, huh? Like what?
Think forged birth certificates, whispers of a communist mentor, even ties to, get this, a stripper. It's like a political thriller.
He sounds more like a bad movie plot.
But hey, we're all about diving deep here. We got an MP3 titled, Get This, background about the shady Obama.
Oh boy. Shady Obama.
And it features an interview with filmmaker Joel Gilbert, the Dreams from My Real Father guy.
Right.
And of course, the one and only Alex Jones chimes in too.
Well, with those two, we're in for a wild ride. So what's the mission today? Debunking or diving in head first?
Either, actually. We're not here to endorse or debunk. We're here to unpack these claims, lay it all out there, and let our listeners decide what to make of it.
Sounds fair. So where do we start?
Well, the big one that keeps popping up, the birth certificate controversy. Everyone remembers that.
Oh yeah, the birther movement. Remember though, it wasn't really about where Obama was born. It was about who his father really was.
Really? I always thought it was about Hawaii.
Nope. The core of the birther movement was that Obama couldn't be president because, they claimed, he wasn't a natural-born citizen. The forged birth certificate wasn't about disputing Hawaii, but his paternity.
Interesting. So they thought the birth certificate was fake just to hide who his dad was?
Exactly.
But, Gilbert and Jones bring in this guy, Mike Zullo, who's supposed to be some forensic document expert.
Okay.
And he claims the birth certificate is a, quote, sloppy forgery.
See, this is where it gets tricky. It's like confirmation bias in action. If you're already convinced Obama's hiding something, any little thing in that birth certificate is proof of a cover-up.
Even though official sources have verified it multiple times. But doesn't it make you wonder why the mainstream media mostly ignored all this? Wouldn't that just make people believe the cover-up even more?
It definitely raises questions. Some say those claims weren't credible enough to cover. But yeah, that silence could also look like a deliberate attempt to suppress something, fueling the conspiracy fire even more.
No easy answers there, I guess.
Nope.
Okay, so let's move on to Gilbert's film, Dreams from My Real Father. Now we're getting into some serious speculation.
Oh, yeah.
He claims Obama's real father was Frank Marshall Davis, this communist and maybe even a Soviet agent.
Ah, the communist angle.
And it gets wilder. Gilbert says he's got nude photos of Obama's mom, Ann Dunham, at Davis's house.
Okay.
And he even suggests one of the women in those photos is Honey Harlow, the famous stripper who later managed the Hubba Hubba Club in Honolulu.
Wait. So we've got a communist, a stripper, and a future president. This is getting ridiculous.
Sounds like something out of a spy movie, right?
More like a bad soap opera. But, okay, let's play along. If this were all true, wouldn't that raise some questions about Davis's connections? And maybe how those connections could have touched Obama's life, even indirectly.
I see what you mean. So who was this Frank Marshall Davis anyway? Gilbert paints him as a pretty radical figure.
He does. He focuses on Davis's communist affiliations and suggests he basically brainwashed young Obama, shaping his radical ideology.
Which later supposedly showed up in his policies as president.
Right, that's the implication. Gilbert even throws in this claim about Obama's grandfather being the insurance guy for that Hubba Hubba Club, funneling a kickback to Davis.
Seriously. So they're tying this all the way back to Obama's family.
That's the narrative Gilbert's building. He also compares Obama to Bill Ayers, the Weather Underground guy, arguing that both use talk about helping working families to hide their real radical agendas.
Interesting. But remember, these are just Gilbert's claims.
Right. We haven't seen any independent verification on this, but it definitely shows us a worldview where Obama's presidency was part of, well, maybe something sinister.
Okay, hold on. There's more. What about this mystery of Obama's missing years in college?
Oh, right. Gilbert claims Obama spent a year studying abroad in Pakistan, but there's no record of it.
No record at all?
Nope. He even says there's no record of Obama at Columbia for 2 whole years, even though Obama claimed to be there.
That's a pretty bold claim. But how does Gilbert back that up?
He points to an interview where Obama mentions living and studying overseas, but Gilbert says Obama meant as an adult, not his childhood in Indonesia.
Okay, I see where he's going with that.
He also says that Obama taking freshman-level courses in his senior year at Columbia is proof he was catching up on stuff he missed.
And to make things even juicier, Gilbert brings up Obama's mother again.
Ann Dunham.
Yeah. He claims she worked for the Ford Foundation in Asia during that time.
suggesting a connection to Obama's alleged time in Pakistan.
Exactly. It's like he's weaving a giant web of claims and speculations.
It is, and it's up to each listener to decide how much weight to give to all this. But what's fascinating is how these stories, true or not, tap into those deep anxieties we have about politicians and their pasts.
So we've got a potential communist father figure, a stripper connection, and missing college years, maybe in Pakistan. What next? This is getting crazy.
It is a lot to process. Just remember, claims and allegations aren't facts. But it's interesting how some of this, even if you don't buy the whole conspiracy thing, plays on real anxieties people had back then.
You mean anxieties beyond the birth certificate and the communist stuff?
Yeah, think about that Pakistan claim. Whether true or not, it fed into fears about Islamic extremism, especially after 9/11.
That's true. It was a tense time.
And don't forget, it was also the Great Recession. People were struggling, looking for someone to blame.
So a president with a secret past, maybe even dangerous connections, provided a simple explanation for a complex problem.
Exactly. It was a narrative that fit with the fear and distrust people already felt. Remember, these theories didn't just appear out of thin air. They came from a specific time and place.
So it's not just about Obama himself, but what he represents, the fears he maybe unintentionally embodied.
Precisely. That's why understanding the context, the history, and the culture is so important. These theories weren't just random ideas, they reflect deeper societal anxieties and trends.
Okay, but let's be real. Some of this is pretty out there, even for conspiracy theories. Do people actually believe this stuff?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's hard to know how many people buy into these specific theories, but they definitely resonated with some, especially those who already distrusted authority and mainstream narratives.
And the internet plays a huge role in spreading these ideas, right? Social media lets these theories reach way more people than ever before.
Absolutely. It's like echo chambers online. People with the same beliefs reinforce each other, and dissenting voices get drowned out. It makes it easier for conspiracy theories to take hold and spread like wildfire.
So where does that leave us? We've explored all these wild claims about Obama, but we haven't really answered the question of whether they're true.
And that's the thing about conspiracy theories. They're built on speculation, hints, and circumstantial evidence. It's almost impossible to prove or disprove them definitively.
But isn't that part of what makes them so interesting? They feed our curiosity, our desire to uncover hidden truths.
Absolutely. But that's why it's crucial to approach them critically, to question assumptions and consider alternative explanations.
It's easy to get caught up in the drama. But we have to remember, these are real people's lives, and these theories can have real consequences.
Exactly. We need to approach these discussions with empathy and a willingness to listen to different perspectives, even when we don't agree.
Okay, so we've covered the birth certificate, the communist connections, the missing college years, but there's another piece to this puzzle. The media's role in all of this.
Ah, yes. That's where things get really interesting. Even discussing these theories, even to debunk them, can give them more attention. It's a tough spot to be in.
So are we doomed either way?
Not necessarily. We can't ignore these theories and hope they disappear. Silence can sometimes be interpreted as agreement. But we also don't want to give them more legitimacy than they deserve by talking about them too much.
So what's the answer?
Approach these theories with skepticism. Ask critical questions, focus on evidence, or the lack thereof. Be aware of our own biases and accept that we might be wrong.
All right, we've laid out the claims, analyzed the context, and talked about how to even discuss these theories. But there's a big question hanging in the air. Why? Why did these theories about Obama take hold? What was it about him or the time he was president that made him such a target for these narratives?
And maybe even more importantly, what does it say about us, about our society, that we're so quick to embrace these alternative explanations, even when they seem so far-fetched?
So are we diving deeper into this rabbit hole?
Down we go. But remember, it's not about blindly accepting every crazy claim. It's about understanding why people feel the need to find meaning, even in chaos.
Let's do it. Let's talk about the psychology behind conspiracy theories. Why are some people so drawn to these alternative narratives, even when they seem so out there?
Well, for one, they offer a sense of order and control in a world that can feel random and unpredictable. Conspiracy theories provide a framework, a narrative that explains complicated events in a simple way.
So instead of feeling powerless against global events or political machinations, you feel like you're in the know, like you have secret knowledge that others don't.
Exactly. It's empowering. You're not just a passive observer. You're actively uncovering the truth.
And it creates a sense of community, right? You're part of a group who sees the world the same way, who share your distrust of authority and belief in hidden agendas.
Absolutely. These theories thrive in communities that feel marginalized or left out. They offer belonging and validation, a feeling that you're not alone in your beliefs.
So it's not just about facts. It's about emotions, about the sense of purpose and belonging these theories provide.
Precisely. That's why debunking them with just logic and evidence is so hard. You're not just challenging beliefs, you're challenging a worldview, how someone understands the world and their place in it.
So how do we address this? If it's not just about the facts, how do we reach people deeply invested in these alternative narratives?
I think it starts with listening, trying to understand where they're coming from, what fears and anxieties are driving their beliefs.
Instead of dismissing them as crazy, acknowledge that their beliefs, even if misguided, come from genuine concerns.
Exactly. Then we can gently introduce other perspectives, offer different ways to interpret the same information.
But without talking down to them, it's a conversation, not a lecture.
Exactly. Building trust and rapport so people feel heard and respected, even if their beliefs are challenged.
So it's a long game, slowly chipping away at distrust and misinformation, one conversation at a time.
Precisely. It's not easy, but it's crucial, especially now when misinformation spreads so quickly and can have such a huge impact on our world.
Wow, this deep dive has taken us to some interesting places. We started with wild claims about Obama, but ended up exploring the very nature of belief and the human need for meaning.
That's the beauty of a deep dive, isn't it? You never know where it'll lead you. It's about curiosity, exploration, and being open to challenging your own assumptions.
So listener, what does this all mean for you? Well, that's for you to decide. We've presented the information, the context, and some perspectives. Now, weigh the evidence, consider what it all means, and draw your own conclusions.
Just remember, critical thinking is key. Don't just accept what you hear, even from us. Question everything, look for different viewpoints, and be open to changing your mind.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the mysteries of the universe and the complexities of the human mind. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.
It's wild, right? How these stories about Obama, like that whole Pakistan thing, tap into something bigger, a deeper unease people felt.
You're saying it's not just the claims themselves, but what they represent.
Exactly. True or not, the Pakistan story played on fears about terrorism, national security, all that post 9/11 anxiety.
Makes sense. It was a whole new world, a lot of uncertainty back then.
And the claims about Obama's, let's say, influences, those play into that too. Don't forget, this was also during the Great Recession. People were hurting, looking for answers, maybe even someone to blame.
So this idea of a president with a hidden past, maybe even dangerous connections, it was a simple explanation for a complicated problem.
Exactly, a narrative that fit the fear and distrust that was already out there. These theories didn't come from nowhere. They're a product of their time, you know?
So these Obama theories tell us as much about the anxieties of that era as they do about Obama himself.
Precisely. They reflect a nation struggling with the economy, terrorism, a world that felt like it was changing too fast.
Okay, but some of those claims, like the missing college records, they seem pretty clumsy. A future president just disappears for a year. No way.
That's where the internet comes in, right? Social media. It can make even the craziest claims sound believable.
Like a game of telephone. The story changes and gets more dramatic each time it's told.
Exactly. And with those algorithms feeding us what we already believe, it's easy to get stuck in these echo chambers online.
So how do we break out of those echo chambers? How do we get people to think critically about this stuff, especially when there are so many emotions involved?
Tough question. Facts and debunking aren't always enough. We need to understand the anxieties and fears that fuel these theories in the first place.
So instead of just saying, that's not true, we need to ask, why do you believe that?
Right. Engage in a real conversation. Listen to people's concerns. Help them develop those critical thinking skills.
It sounds like it's about building trust, not winning an argument.
Exactly. People are more open to changing their minds when they feel heard and respected. And we have to remember, we all have biases.
So while we're looking at these Obama theories, we need to check our own assumptions, be open to being wrong.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is about constantly questioning, reevaluating our own beliefs too, not just other people's.
Okay, so we've talked about the birth certificate, the communist stuff, the missing years. What about this claim that the mainstream media is part of the cover-up? How does that fit with the idea that these theories thrive online?
Good point. It seems like a contradiction, right?
Totally.
Uh-huh.
On one hand, there's distrust of the media, this idea that they're hiding the truth. On the other end, you have these theories spreading like wildfire online, going against everything the media says.
It all comes back to confirmation bias. People look for information that supports what they already believe, even if those beliefs contradict each other. So someone who already distrusts the media, seeing these theories ignored by big news outlets, just confirms that suspicion.
It's a vicious cycle then. The lack of mainstream coverage becomes proof of the conspiracy.
Exactly. And social media just amplifies that. Those algorithms show us more of what we already like. So if you're into conspiracy theories, you see more of that, and it just reinforces your worldview.
It's like we're all living in our own little bubbles.
In a way, yeah. And breaking out of those bubbles, seeing other perspectives can be really hard.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we start talking to each other across these echo chambers?
It starts with listening, trying to understand where the other person's coming from, even if we completely disagree. Everyone has their own story, their own experiences that shape how they see the world.
So instead of trying to prove someone wrong, we focus on building relationships, finding common ground.
Absolutely. We need spaces where people feel safe to share, even when their opinions are controversial or unpopular.
It's a big challenge, but it seems like the only way to tackle misinformation and these conspiracy theories in the long run.
It's a long game for sure. It takes patience, empathy, and a commitment to open dialogue.
So listener, what about you? Have you ever talked to someone who believes in these kinds of theories? How did you approach that conversation? Did you find any common ground?
We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences.
We've talked about the psychology of conspiracy theories, how they spread, but we still haven't really answered why these specific theories about Obama took off. What was it about him or that time period that made him such a target?
That's a great question. Why Obama? Why not some other president? Was it his race, his background, his policies, or something else entirely?
There's definitely more to uncover here. This deep dive just keeps getting deeper.
It does, and the answers might surprise you.
All right, let's get back to this question. Why Obama? Why were these theories about him so popular?
It's a good question, because it goes beyond just the claims themselves. It forces us to look at the whole picture, the culture and politics of that time.
Right. He wasn't the first president to be questioned or criticized. What made Obama different?
Well, a few things. First, he was the first African-American president. That alone made him stand out. It was a huge historical moment.
But wouldn't that also make him a target for certain types of attacks? Especially ones based on, racial prejudice.
Absolutely. Some theories, like the birther thing, played directly into those anxieties and prejudices that already existed.
You mean those stereotypes and ideas that have been used to discredit Black people for, forever?
Exactly. It's like these theories tapped into a deep well of distrust that was already there.
So they were building on something that already existed.
Right. And it wasn't just about outright racism. There's also something called implicit bias or unconscious prejudice.
So even people who don't think they're racist could still have these unconscious biases that make them more likely to believe these stories.
Exactly. That's the tricky thing about implicit bias. It works below the surface, affecting our perceptions without us even realizing it.
And how does that connect to these theories about Obama?
Well, think about it. These theories often presented Obama as an outsider, someone who wasn't really American or had a secret agenda.
Playing on those fears about race, identity, belonging.
Exactly. Trying to make him seem illegitimate, like he didn't belong in the White House.
And for some people, these theories were a way to explain their discomfort with having a Black president, even if they wouldn't admit it.
It's a sad truth, but race definitely played a role in all this. But it wasn't the only factor. Obama's background was pretty unique too.
Right. He had that multicultural upbringing, his childhood in Indonesia, his father from Kenya. That's not your typical presidential background.
Exactly. All of that fueled the narrative that he was different and other.
And instead of being celebrated, that difference was used against him.
Exactly. The message was, he's not one of us, he doesn't get us.
Divide and conquer. It's a tactic as old as time.
And it works especially well when your target is already someone who stands out, like Obama did.
But there was also pushback against Obama's policies, right? Weren't some people just against his political agenda?
Of course. Legitimate political disagreements are normal, and they definitely existed. But the line between healthy criticism and conspiracy theories can get blurry, especially when politics are so polarized.
So how do we tell the difference? How do we know when it's just healthy skepticism and when it's crossed the line into conspiracy thinking?
Well, healthy skepticism is based on evidence and logic. It's about questioning things, being open to different viewpoints. Conspiracy theories usually rely on speculation, rumors, and ignoring evidence that doesn't fit the theory.
So conspiracy theorists are looking for proof, not truth.
Yeah, you could say that. They don't want a balanced view or to understand the nuances of a complex issue. They want evidence that supports what they already believe, even if that evidence is weak or made up.
It's like a trap where the theory becomes more important than reality.
That's the danger of it. Conspiracy thinking can lead people down a path of misinformation and distrust, and it makes it really hard to have real conversations or find common ground.
So how do we deal with this? How do we navigate a world where conspiracy theories and misinformation are everywhere?
It's a tough one, but we can do it. We need to develop critical thinking skills, learn how to evaluate information, and be willing to challenge our own biases.
That sounds like a lot of work. Where do we even start?
Education is key, teaching kids how to be media literate, giving them the tools to spot misinformation and propaganda.
But it's not just kids, right? Adults need help with this too.
Absolutely. We need to encourage a culture of critical thinking where people feel comfortable questioning assumptions, weighing evidence, and listening to different perspectives.
And being willing to change our minds when we're wrong.
Exactly. Clinging to beliefs, even when the evidence says otherwise, that's not being intellectually honest. It's just dogma.
So what's the big takeaway for our listeners today? What should they remember from this deep dive into the world of Obama conspiracy theories?
Be a critical thinker. Don't just believe everything you read or hear, even from people you trust. Do your own research, get different perspectives, and never be afraid to ask questions.
And remember, even the most outlandish claims can teach us something about ourselves, our fears, our anxieties.
Right. Conspiracy theories might be based on lies and fear, but they can also show us our societal biases and problems.
So even as we debunk the claims, we need to understand why these theories appeal to some people.
It's about understanding that we all want to make sense of the world, especially when things feel uncertain. But that search for meaning can sometimes lead us astray.
Well, this deep dive certainly took us to some unexpected places. We started with a forged birth certificate and ended up talking about race, identity, and truth in the digital age.
It's been a wild ride, and hopefully our listeners found it interesting.
So what do you say, listener? Ready to keep exploring?
There's a whole world of information out there waiting to be discovered.
Just remember to bring your critical thinking skills, your curiosity, and an open mind. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions.